When examining available data, we discover experiments relating to the reality of telepathy and hypnosis. In one experiment, a subject was hypnotized, and another was given spicy food items. The hypnotized subject was telepathically informed about these tastes and correctly vocally identified them. In my case, conducting this kind of experiment could present difficulties on ethical grounds, and therefore I preferred to do it in a more controlled environment. I decided to lightly hypnotize myself and experiment in tuning into telepathic input, which was to be vocalized and recorded. Maybe Merva's unconscious or conscious thoughts could be telepathically transmitted. However, I was not absolutely certain if my thoughts would influence her to utter the words I was thinking, and wondered what kind of mind transference would be established. If we could record the event, the result could be analyzed and verified against personally known factors. For instance, could any of my thoughts, which she most certainly had no previous knowledge of, become audible through her? And similarly, what she thought transferred telepathically into my mind. If successful, we could conduct further tests. This could lead to new discoveries about the workings of the human mind. I took this opportunity, and the recordings presented similarities to what I discreetly thought all along. As might be expected, there was no exactitude. However, Merva claimed that I had relayed all her thoughts as they were, and in addition to this, she recognized her guardian angel's known characteristics, just like those who had been attending the gatherings long before my arrival did. She repeatedly said it was uncanny and unbelievable. For her, it was the proof she was seeking. For her audience, it was a most exciting event. One of the members asked me if I could detect their innermost thoughts, and another answered her on behalf of me, saying it was an absolute certainty on my part that I could. I found the idea amusing, while trying not to show it, and told them that it would be a most undesirable situation. Although telepathy under hypnosis has proved to be true, certain disciplines would be required. As humans, we do it on a daily basis, without the need for hypnosis. Consider the times when you were thinking about someone you knew, and that someone called you on the telephone or was at your door shortly afterwards. In this instance, either your thoughts were detected by the other, or you have detected your friends. Although this may sound highly unlikely, it happens all the time. But does it also likewise happen with other intelligences throughout the universe? Is it therefore possible to detect the thoughts of others in different existences from within the cosmos? What about those different dimensions, even from within our own world? Can we feel what they are thinking right now? If this can be scientifically verified, especially after thorough research and study, imagine what it would mean for the human species living on this wonderful world. However, having psychoanalyzed the person in question, it would be easy for someone like me to tell her what she wanted to hear, even if I was semi-conscious or under mild self-hypnosis. You might think of me being overly self-critical, but I am not. Think about the close emotional and mental ties between mothers and their toddlers, between brothers, sisters, lovers, and close friends. Is it impossible? If this is true, how could it be impossible between humans and those of different dimensions? Imagine having an electronic device or a radio you can use for corresponding with others in different dimensions. There are people working on such inventions right now. Here is a classic question. Do we survive the inevitable and live on in a different dimension, wherefrom we can communicate with our loved ones? On the other hand, I remember my mother saying to me that her two beloved sons had many similarities to each other, as if they were identical twins, born at the same time. Years later, we discovered that our lives and life experiences have been lived along parallel lines. Was that the real reason behind our ability to feel each other's thoughts? If thoughts can be sent out and be detected by other minds, then there is nothing to stop thoughts influencing other elements of life on molecular levels. This has been proven by repetitious experimentation using water molecules. What are we then doing with our thoughts? Look around you and consider all the conflicts and negativity bathing the world. Then think about the teachings of known secular systems, with their fanatical viewpoints about everything and everybody. How many people do you see talking positively about their own world, their work, family, and the little circles they have created? Listen to your daily news and consider what your world is surrounded with. If people would only forget their differences for a moment, and everyone dedicate that moment to one positive outcome, thinking of peace and unity, what could be achieved? This has been tested in small ways in a meditative state just by thinking positively, and, as with Washington, D.C. reports, furnished by the FBI confirmed at least a 25% drop in the crime rate in that city. Such a meditation was conducted worldwide over the internet some time ago. Thoughts are things. I know for a fact that by surrounding ourselves with beautiful thoughts on a daily basis, we tend to lead happier and carefree lives. Think also about those people who only suffer, sometimes without any reason, and you may be able to discover their melancholic and negative thought patterns they are subjected to from exterior sources on a daily basis. Perhaps we need to make a very definite decision to have better and positive thoughts, considering healthier lifestyles and dwelling on a more peaceful world, not on inventing how best to destroy our brothers just because they are following a different pathway. Do I hear you say it is very difficult? All peace starts within each individual. Be at peace with yourself, and you will generate peace. Instead of condemning others, perhaps the best action for humanity is to live in peace, without separatism. If one desires to be creative, there cannot be any negative interference or any thought which is harmful to the process. Such a process would not work purely on any organizational or religious system. It needs to be worldwide and universal, involving all humanity without any separation, without claiming our method is better than yours, or even considering a great deity having only chosen our way to be correct. It needs to be worldwide. When in Perth presenting radio, attending WAUFO-IC, WOFOIC Research, and Merva's group reasonably regularly, a large number of people showed great interest in my teachings. One such person was Elizabeth of Polish descent. She had 3 young boys without their father, as he had left the family and was living in London. She could not understand why he had done so without any reason, but according to her sons, he left because of their mother's strange beliefs. Interestingly, she was keenly interested in teachings of Elizabeth Clare Prophet, attending every meeting and taking their semi-religious books extremely seriously. She had brothers in Sydney who were more than willing to take care of her children, but she preferred them to live spiritually as she was. When she met me at Merva's group, apparently after hearing about my fame, she felt the need to meet that highly spiritual man. I had a cup of coffee with her and listened to her multifaceted stories. She told me all about her former partners. Upon her discovery of me, she thought she was falling in love without realizing why. She believed that if I felt the same way towards her, her boys would have a father again who would truly care for their spiritual needs. What about their other important needs, I wondered, education and welfare? However, I was not interested in any affair, let alone remarrying and having instant children. I did not feel comfortable with the idea. She was also obsessed with another long-haired gentleman who smoked heavily and was apparently often drunk. Yet he used to have his own group, which met regularly, and he supposedly channeled to Jesus or other well-known religious figures. He was bringing good news from them to his group, which worshipped him. There were complaints about him taking advantage of younger ladies, and he did not show much interest in Elizabeth. However, Elizabeth always took sides with him, adoringly claiming that he was falsely judged. She invited me to one of his gatherings where I did not find anything new, other than him talking downgradingly about anything and everything the world offered. There were others, like Elizabeth, who thought of him as being the second coming of Christ. I felt unwanted there, as if I was likely to become the competition, and, following my feelings, I happily left them, never to return. Elizabeth kept inviting and meeting me over cups of coffee. She started frequenting my studio, occasionally visiting me after hours, and usually, when I was not home, putting fresh fruits in a plastic bag in front of the door. Although taking it as a nice gesture at first, I wondered why she saw it fit to do something like that. Was it perhaps a token of her secret care? Could it perhaps be a form of sacrificial offering to a guru? I did not have an answer other than theorizing that perhaps it was for a charitable purpose. Her sons, who were keenly interested in playing soccer and often involved in outdoor activities, clearly missed their father. Her eldest was beginning to show signs of rebellion against her, wanting to go to his father, and understandably, she was very concerned. She thought he needed a role model immediately. Some evenings she used to take them to the radio station, unannounced, where I presented a variety of programs. Sometimes she came on her own, still hoping to develop a relationship. Another interesting observation was that when she met me the very first time at Merva's gathering, she thought I had to be closely related to the famed Indian holy man, namely Sai Baba, who had a worldwide following. Elizabeth even told me with some certainty that I was an aspect of Sai. On the other hand, Elizabeth Clare Prophet was apparently presenting herself as the reincarnation of Guinevere, strictly following the footsteps of Saint Germain, who turned lead into gold. There was a regular meeting near my unit in Victoria Park, but I did not have a chance to attend it. From outside one could hear much chanting, and we were told they had a closed circle. However, if I visited them, even when uninvited, they would most certainly open their home to me. Elizabeth showed great interest and, strangely, a very unusual devotional respect towards me. After her discovery, she thought she had finally found genuine love, a wonderful partner, and a possible caring father in me. How sad it was to see those people accepting me and feeling good in my presence, and yet my own family I totally adored considered me evil and rejected me. I had no idea where my first true love was, who had turned bitter against me due to being conditioned religiously and abducting our children on advice given by her close associates. I learned a long time later that she was living in Perth, but at the time of my staying there, I had no idea about this. Maybe the universe directed my footsteps into that part of the world for a reason, without me being aware of the circumstances. Some would probably consider it as divine providence, or perhaps the heavens above seeing fit. There was something in the air no one could properly define, but as with everything else, it would come to light. Perhaps there was something called divine justice after all. Maybe within this grand illusion we call life, the universe had a few new plans for me. I was certainly not prepared for another marital status, and even the word marriage scared me. Besides, I needed to recover from my own traumas, needing some time to heal. But Elizabeth might have been thinking otherwise, and so she has seen fit to visit me often. I prefer to remain as friends and not further the situation. For her part, she was determined to try all kinds of tactics, often visiting me at home, just popping in with an excuse that she happened to be around, the boys wanting to see me, or she was visiting another friend. There were times when she noticed the flickering lights streaming from my monitors from outside and interpreted it as being dependent on alien technology. After seeing so many unusual-looking electronic devices at my place and noticing unusual phenomena in the sky above my dwelling, even when I was not home, she told me I could only be from distances far outside this world. She had involved her young sons and some of her other friends to think in similar ways in her assessments of my person. She and her boys often questioned me about these issues, but I refrained from talking about them. Some things need not be spoken. It was long after the aerial phenomenon observed by several people, unknown to each other from many corners of the city and nearby suburbs, and, as you may remember me telling you after my report of what I observed from my balcony, had been featured in the daily papers, and an interview with me was published in magazines. Elizabeth was convinced that I had a galactic, indeed an extraterrestrial connection. Again, it was a subject under scrutiny, and I did not want to dwell on this either. She told me about the photos of me and a drawing I made of an alien girl, printed in full color in one of the magazines which she had framed and were hanging on her walls. Occasionally she brought her sons at weekends to stay with me in the spare rooms, and often exclaimed she trusted me more than anybody else in the world. That was nice to hear, but forcing her way into my life was a little extreme. Sadly, my own family would never consider me as being trustworthy and honest, because I was not in their truth and was disfellowshipped. I suppose their own treacherous actions, multiple lies, and covering up of abuse amongst the witnesses was never considered. Merva's young relatives had a very sick child with a horrible medical condition. The poor child's entire stomach was coming out of her mouth, and after a long period of suffering, medical science could not help her. After her passing, the young parents needed psychological help and some words of comfort. I hope I have been able to do that, for I knew they were extremely grateful. I was also happy to oblige so that they could cope with their tragic loss. I compiled some of their infants' handiwork into a piece of art for them. I was happy having started my own business in a shopping arcade in Victoria Park. The shop had been empty for a very long time, and the owners were looking for a tenant who would accept a rent-free period. I thought it was a nice idea to start a small gallery of my own paintings and feature local artists' works, while also selling art materials for budding artists as well as local schools. Having discovered this, Merva told me she had spoken to her brother, who was a keen yachtsman, often sailing around Perth, and was more than willing to contribute towards my business. However, not knowing anything about her brother, I could not accept their generous offer. I knew whatever resources I had would be more than sufficient for the while, yet they insisted on helping me with at least $1,000. I explained to them that I was uncomfortable with the additional burden of paying it back at a certain period of time, and it possibly being dependent on future uncertainties, and I did not desire to be seen as a cheat or as someone not honoring his obligations. He told me in the presence of Merva and others that if I so wished to pay it back whenever it was more favorable, I could do so, otherwise he would love to offer it as a gift. I hoped I did not hear him wrongly. This appeared to me like an omen of good things beginning to happen, and I intended to pay it back in the near future. When I entered that shop for the very first time, I knew there was great need to create an attractive but unusual decor. I painted a lovely divider using stretched canvas. Having obtained bales of hay, which needed fire-retardant treatment, and a couple of large wine barrels for my special decoration, I stocked the shop and gallery with a variety of art materials and a collection of my own paintings and drawings, as well as artwork from local school children. Then I extensively advertised the business in the daily papers, local newspapers, and industry calendars. Some shop owners wanted my help with their signwriting needs. A while later I started television advertising. I imagined that if my children were able to see my advertisements and recognize my whereabouts, they would hopefully attempt to see me. Then I laughed about my empty imaginings, for at the time I did not know where they had been abducted to. What made me imagine about my children living in this part of the world, I cannot say. Probably it was nothing more than just wishful thinking. As mentioned, years later I was to learn that they were living in Perth, and obviously some intelligence exterior to mine was trying to correspond with me about the injustices I, as well as my children, had been subjected to. That something beyond normal comprehension led me to the West in the first place, but I did not realize it. No matter what the real evildoers were trying to achieve by destroying my family and my very special bond with my partner, it could never stop them discovering my whereabouts after I moved closer to where they lived. And perhaps the cries of the unnamed lad I was hearing for a long while within my imagination were not empty dreaming, void of substance after all. I heard that my son had once visited me in the shop, but I could not be sure or believe it because if he dropped in, he would introduce himself or say something to me, unless he was under strict instructions never to approach me. Furthermore, not expecting any surprises like that, I probably would not be able to recognize him. Maybe this was bound to remain wishful thinking on my part. In truth, I did not expect any of them to visit me. I did not expect a good word or smile from any of them any more. Many years later, when Birgit approached me as an adult, while I was having a cup of coffee at Meyer, Melbourne, she informed me that they were living in Perth, and their mother was cutting out certain advertisements and articles from the newspapers, probably removing my advertisements to hide my whereabouts. At one stage, Birgit told me what her mother said. "Oh my God, your father has found us." Was it also recommended by the witnesses? For they most certainly followed the dictates of their God. If that was so, one needs to ask who, in truth, the real evil was. At the time, I thought that at least Claude would come visiting me if he was living in Perth. I even thought that, knowing how naive their mother was, she might have taken them to Germany. Then again, if she had discovered my existence, she would never allow them to come closer to me, and therefore it would be better for me to put this thought aside. After all, as we have already discovered, she changed her and the children's family names so that I could never find them again, and this way she could completely wipe me off from their lives. Is that not pure evil? In truth, I was utterly rejected by the real evildoers. The Jehovah's Witness organization has been a most evil one since their beginnings in the 1870s. Theirs were despicable policies guiding their lives through the organization, showing no mercy for those supposedly questioning the spirit, while all other crimes are swept under the carpet. They shun and break families, if any member thereof leaves their heartless society. This is not said discriminately, but in absolute honesty. I was not surprised when I discovered that their governing body finally admitted to being no longer inspired by Jehovah God, and that they are fallible. Then we, the allegedly rejected of God, after their judicial committee's decision of disfellowshipment of so-called sinners, ask them, "Where is your truth? For everything you were preaching, all your principles and lifestyles are erroneous, for you are, by your own admission, subject to error." Cutting off a family member in the name of religion is unethical and unrighteous, originating not from God, but the devil. Encouraging the children to be baptized at a very young age when they cannot think like an adult is equally incorrect, for even Jesus was not baptized until the age of 30. When they became adults, after not having a real childhood and teenage years, it is not surprising for them to rebel and leave the organization they had been enslaved to. This is also the reason why mental breakdowns and suicides are prevalent amongst the shunned and rejected. There are two specific questions the witnesses ask after their baptism talk, and if you notice, they are deliberate. On the basis of the sacrifice of Jesus Christ, have you repented of your sins and dedicated yourself to Jehovah to do His will? And do you understand that your dedication and baptism identify you as one of Jehovah's Witnesses in association with God's Spirit-directed organization? Imagine asking an 8-year-old and expecting an answer to these questions. The word Jehovah does not stand for Jesus Christ, but the alleged organization of God, and the second question refers to the said organization, but not Jesus as He told them. Read Matthew 28, chapters 19 and 20, and you will discover how Jesus told his disciples what to do in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. In truth, this is not being practiced by the witnesses. Jehovah's Witnesses altered every command Jesus issued by interpreting the scriptures according to their own ends. In the book of Revelations, we are advised never to add or extract anything from the Word of God. The witnesses are often discovered speaking about it, but in their New World Translation of the Bible, they removed certain texts. For instance, in Acts chapter 8, 37, it clearly indicates that Jesus is the Son of God, but it has been removed from their version of the Bible. Their excuse is that theological scholars also have omitted the holy name of God, but according to unbiased and thorough research, this is an incorrect assumption on their part. In fact, recently they have omitted the words from the second baptismal question, and they no longer consider spirit-guided. One wonders if their organization is actually representing Babylon the Great, which they bitterly oppose. Remember what Jesus said? Only through me. He did not say, through the JW org can you come to the Father. You may also appreciate this following discovery on my part. I find it quite amusing to note that Jehovah's Witnesses immediately annul their vows as soon as they answer the supposed spiritual questions, before or after their baptism through immersion in water. As I indicated earlier, they have been repeating that the so-called faithful slave, their governing body, is not inspired, and most importantly, fallible. Taking this into account, one needs to consider also one of those 2013 Watchtower articles, which specifically indicates that Jehovah's Witnesses are usually being asked if they recognized that God's organization is directed by the Spirit of God, and as soon as they answer it in the affirmative, they deny the supposed reality of it, as their governing body is not inspired. Remember, the root word for inspired is spirit. Therefore, it actually annuls the baptism they are conducting. This is why they so cleverly removed the two words from the second question they have been asking for decades. There are a number of issues the witnesses avoid talking about or responding to. This may be due to not being knowledgeable or only following an ignorant leader, or feeling embarrassed about making Jesus appear untruthful. In John chapter 2, verses 18 to 22, Jesus speaks of his body being the temple, which would be raised from the dead. Yet the witnesses I debated this issue with believe that Jesus literally manufactured bodies, so making the actual resurrection appear untrue and fictional. I also believe that they are not aware of it in general. The witnesses remain stuck in the groove, for they have no answers and never listen to anybody or anything unless proceeding from their governing body. If you encounter the witnesses, you are very likely to discover they always remain distant in their responses, but love to talk to you about their one-dimensional approach, while trying to appear extraordinarily sophisticated. All they want of you is your surrender, dedication, and sacrifice to their organization.